Sure, man.
Well, everyone, welcome back to a very exciting episode of the Storybox podcast. Today, my friends, I'm delighted to welcome someone who I've wanted to speak to for a long time, and it's finally happening today. I always love listening to him on different podcasts. One of my favorite podcast episodes is whenever him and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee get together and have a conversation. But his name is Dr. Rupy, and he's a London-based doctor specializing in general practice and emergency medicine, which is pretty cool. Who is on a mission as well to reverse the tidal wave of preventable lifestyle disease, one plate of delicious food at a time. Man, that's just like speaking to my heart right there and my stomach. He has a master's in nutritional medicine, and he's the founder of Europe's first culinary medicine program for medical schools, as well as hosting the #1 rated podcast, The Doctor's Kitchen, which you can go and check out as well. He's got a number of books. He's got a website, a blog that you can all check out. He's got a new book coming out next year, I believe. Dr. Rupy Cooks, Healthy, Easy, Flavor. Love the titles of his books. It's pretty cool too. But Dr. Rupy, man, can I welcome you so much to the Storybox podcast today?
Thank you so much, Jay. It's been lovely chatting before this pod as well and figuring out how much we have in common in terms of, where you were based in Australia, in New South Wales, my connection to Australia where I used to live there, and the fact that both of our partners have the same name.
How cool is that, man? Honestly, it's just such a small world. I think it's honestly incredible how we have so much in common and yet we're a world away from each other.
Totally.
I feel a little bit more connected to you just by saying all that and hearing just a little bit about each other. But man, I'm so grateful for your time and cannot wait to dive further into your backstory in just a moment. But before we do that, my very first question for you is, what does success look like for you?
What is success in life for me? I think my definition of success has changed as I've got a little bit more mature, I think, in figuring out exactly what I want to achieve. So I'm 37 now. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, it would be tied to the amount in my bank account, tied to my professional career, tied to a title that I may have or may have not have achieved or would have liked to have achieved within medicine, becoming a consultant, specializing in a certain pathway, living in a certain area. But now, if I'm being honest, I've sort of leaned into the more spiritual side. And I think success for me is finding happiness in the moments between moments. And what that means is, let's take my last week as an example. I was on a TV show that just went out on Sunday. I was recording there. I had a successful launch of my app earlier this year, and it was featured again by Apple. We had a big shout out and a big drive for our app downloads. I think it was on Wednesday or something like that. We got 1,000 downloads in a day. And I had a few other successes. But if you just measure success by those wins, then the moments in between that, they sort of diminish in terms of importance. And what I'm trying to lean into a lot more is actually finding happiness, gratitude, contentment in those moments in between those big wins, quote unquote. And so for me, success is just finding that sort of nice, steady ground where I'm just always feeling at peace with myself, rather than always having to chase the next big thing, the next big high, the next dopamine rush. Because I feel that's sort of like a race to the bottom of a downward spiral if you can't consistently keep up those high emotions. So yeah, that's success to me. And I feel like I'm finding that a lot more actually, preparing before this podcast, exercising in the morning, my walk, when I first get that exposure to sunlight, that's success. I love it. It just makes me, really, really happy. So yeah, that's success for me, man.
Love that answer, man. There's so many areas that I want to tap into with that particular answer. And one of them was, you mentioned the spiritual side of things and the happiness between happiness, those moments, right? what have you found to be the most challenging part about actually getting to the spiritual side of life, finding a sense of peace, as well as trying to find those moments? Because do you find they come few and far between for you, or do they come more frequently these days?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think to answer the question really directly, it's to be aware of my mimetic desire. So it kind of leans into this theory that I've been learning a lot more about recently, by René Girard. He was like this French philosopher that I think worked in Indiana, Bloomington for a while. I believe he was involved in Stanford. I might get that wrong, but he came up with this theory of mimetic theory, which is basically it's easier to desire things when it's been first desired by someone else, and you can model your desires on someone else's. So simple example, your friend, let's say, who lives in the area, you've grown up with him, he suddenly decides to get a new car. He gets a Ferrari or something. And then all of a sudden, even though you may never have had a pinup car as a kid, you might never have been involved in, looking up the car mechanics, you might never have watched racing. Suddenly, it sparks something deep in you that you need to have the same car. You need to also like desire the same thing. You want to go out and buy a Ferrari, whatever it is. That is mimetic desire in action. And I think something for me that has helped me lean into the spiritual side and maintaining contentment is to actually be aware of my mimetic desires, because it can occur at a very subconscious level. And, when you see accolades, particularly, let's say in my field where I'm publishing books, I launched my app now, the Doctor's Kitchen app on the App Store, you have these sort of charts and you have these sort of accolades. Yeah, Sunday Times bestseller, New York Times bestseller, app of the day, number one on top 10. Do you know what I mean? And so when you see other apps, you see other books, you're like, I want that. I want to win the game. I want to have that sort of congratulatory moment. But actually, is that truly what makes you happy? And so really diving deep into what literally makes you happy, what are the foundations for happiness, and being aware of that mimetic desire, which is sort of like a cultural phenomena, yet it's taboo to talk about, because what we're essentially talking about is envy and jealousy. Being aware of that as a driving force is something that I think helps me maintain that sort of spiritual side and really, answer the question to myself, what actually makes me happy? And when you dive down into it, it's family, it's connection, it's purpose, all those different elements that we like to talk about. But being aware of that, I think is a hack that a lot of people can learn from.
Yeah, those desires you were mentioning, I kept thinking about, it would be nice because I'm about to release my very first book into the world next month. And I'm like, you know what? It would be nice because I'm constantly looking at all my best-selling author friends, and like, it would be great to have a best-selling book. But in essence, I don't think that is going to make me happy long-term. It might make me happy in the short term, but to give me a sense of joy and peace and fulfillment long-term, I think it's just being present in the moment and being grateful for the fact that I've got a book coming out, and it's going to even, I hope that it helps one or two people, that sort of thing. But you're right. I think you can get into that stage of envy and jealousy with someone else that has a bigger audience than you. And you're like, what are they doing that I'm not doing? It's like, I'm working hard too, It's like that constant cycle. And I think just trying to break that cycle for yourself and your own sense of peace and comfort, that for me, I've found it really, really difficult at times because I want that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you know what? If you ask yourself the question, like, okay, you want that, that's fair enough. It's okay to want things, but be really conscious of why you want something. And if you can't answer the question, you can answer it rationally to yourself. Like, I want that because I want to influence as many people as possible. I want to help as many people as possible. And those are noble sort of causes. There are noble reasons, but you got to dive really deep. And actually, if you're being honest with yourself, and if I'm being honest with myself, the reason why I wanted a Sunday Times bestseller is because I wanted to be congratulated. I wanted to have that accolade. I wanted to have that award. Yes, I wanted all the other things, but we have to be really honest with ourselves. And when you're honest with each other, you can, it's almost like seeing the Matrix. You can see the mimetic desires. You can see why you're actually doing things. And I'll be honest, if you're not clear about why you want those particular awards or those occurrences, I'll just wait for that to go past. You'll find yourself, let's say, achieving that, but then wanting something more or feeling a void when you do achieve that because you haven't really fulfilled what truly makes you happy. And then you want another award. You'll want, instead of a Sunday Times bestseller, you want to be a Sunday Times bestseller for 10 weeks in a row, like someone else. And if it's not 10 weeks, then it's going to be 100 weeks. And then maybe you want a New York Times bestseller as well. So all these different elements, they'll stack on upon each other, and they'll make you feel paradoxically less fulfilled than if you actually just leaned into what made you happy in the first place.
So let's just say for you, Rupy, that you achieve all the things that you actually set out to achieve. Then what?
Exactly. Then what? And so this is why, I have a set of goals that I affirm every single morning. Yeah. Part of my regime is I meditate, I hydrate, I take my supplements, I stretch every single day, and I look through the notes application on my phone across these different affirmations and these different goals that I set myself. However, what I try and practice is a detachment from those goals. And detachment, it's not very sort of sexy to talk about, but detaching yourself from those goals and actually finding contentment in everything else that is free and accessible, and actually you provide and you practice gratitude with. That's how you can prevent yourself from sort of that spiral of always wanting more and more and more, and actually achieving enough. And this is working for me very well because it means that I can be aspirational. I can be someone who still wants to be a go-getter, someone who still wants to, be quote unquote successful by modern society standards, whilst at the same time being super happy, whether or not I achieve that or not. So, it's a paradox because at the same time, you want to have a successful business, you want to employ a bunch of people, you want to make millions of pounds or millions of dollars. But at the same time, you have this deep contentment inside yourself where you're grateful for moments between the moments. You're grateful for that walk in the morning. You're grateful for that cup of water. You're always practicing that sort of grounding, the sort of grounding elements that keep you content throughout the day. So yeah, it's a bit of a paradox, but I feel like if people learnt those strategies, then we'd have a lot less people feeling unfulfilled.
Yeah, I think you are spot on with that. And one of the things that I'm interested in, having said all this for yourself, Rupy, when you were a kid, did you want to be this sort of person, the best-selling author, the podcast host, having an app, doing all these incredible things with food? Did you see yourself in this career path, or just a doctor?
No, no, definitely not. This is it's weird. I feel like I've been pulled in lots of different directions, and over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, I've been a lot more intentional about where I want to go. So my story, I guess, when I was a kid is, I was very much in that sort of competitive nature of getting the best grades, making sure I went to the best university, making sure that I was keeping up with my sort of family friends. So-and-so went to this university. Well, I'm going to go to this university. I'm going to get better and better and better. And sort of that competitive element is definitely something that has put me in good stead, because it's meant that, I went to a great university, I got a great education, et cetera, et cetera. But really, when it comes to being truly fulfilled, was I fulfilled? Was I ever going to be fulfilled if I went down purely that medical path and I became, a consultant surgeon and I specialized in a certain area of plastic surgery or gastrointestinal surgery, whatever it might have been? I'm not too sure. I don't think so. Mm-hmm. When I started the Doctor's Kitchen, it was really out of a passion project, and then opportunities sort of presented themselves to me. And I said yes to a lot of things. Yes, I'll do a book. Yes, I'll do a podcast. Yes, I'll do TV. Yes, I'll do speaking engagements. And over the last couple of years, I've been sort of allowing myself to take a bit of a break and think to myself, what do I actually want to achieve? And that's sort of where the tech element came from, because the mission, I guess, the mission definitely wasn't this when I started. The mission was just to sort of help my local patient population eat well and learn a bit more about the evidence base behind nutrition. But the mission now is to help 1 billion people leverage the power of food to prevent illness and improve performance. And so the easiest way, or the most straightforward way, I should say, and the way that is going to have the greatest likelihood of success is via tech. And that's why I started this idea of creating like the headspace for healthy eating, a platform that will educate people on how they can eat well every day and give them the means to do so. And this is sort of like where my purpose is sort of going. And you know, who knows, I might be doing something completely different in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm just going to sort of lean into how my career progresses. But that's definitely something I'm a lot more intentional about today.
I want to get to the doctor's kitchen in just a moment, but I wanted to ask you, when you were in medical school, did they teach you anything about the importance of nutrition at all?
No. Well, we got the equivalent of like 5 hours or like half a day of nutrition training, but that's it. Wasn't yeah, that's it. Yeah. It wasn't practical nutrition. It was very much like, you know, TPN or total parenteral nutrition. So that's where, you know, you have very sick patients in HDU or ITU. They can't swallow, or they're in a coma, and you give them nutrition via drips or via direct feeding into the GI system. It wasn't the kind of stuff that we would hope the doctors and other clinicians are taught, you know, when it comes to the cardioprotective effects of diet, or how to even start having a conversation about changing one's food habits, or, you know, instilling other behavior change techniques when it comes to optimizing someone's default meal. Or, you know, the stuff that I talk about, like on socials and all the rest of it, is really stuff that I wish I was taught at med school. And that's kind of why, like, I started my nonprofit, Culinary Medicine, to sort of upskill the next generation of doctors to be able to have those practical conversations in clinic. That's been a bit of an upward hill struggle, getting it into medical schools and that kind of stuff. And we're still sort of in limbo with that at the moment. We're trying to create this digital course, and it's like, it's going up and down, but like, but yeah, there's definitely something that needs to change. And I think everyone has this realization. Like, I'm sure you're probably thinking to yourself, that's kind of crazy that we don't get taught this in med school, right?
I'm thinking it's actually really wild. Like, why is that? It's like, why don't they, if it's so important, and doctors like yourself, and I know Dr. Chatterjee as well, and all these other incredible doctors, not just in the UK, but in the US and even in Australia, are finally starting to realize. But then all of a sudden, the foundational elements in education, they're grassroots. Like, they're not really changing that much, or are they? Like, you've got to help me out here, Dr. Rupy. Like, are they changing, or why is there so much like backlash when it comes to incorporating the importance of diet and nutrition?
I think the tide is turning on that, if I'm honest. I think a lot more people are coming around to the idea of nutrition as an important foundational tool for preventative health, at least. You know, the way I look at the food as medicine spectrum is preventative, supportive, and interventional. So preventative, you know, there's no arguing against the fact that an improved diet or the ability to eat consistently well can reduce the risks of a whole suite of different illnesses, whether it be cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, metabolic disease, all the conditions that are, the most expensive and the most prevalent, particularly in Western populations. You also have, the element of supportive medicine, where if you're going into surgery or you're going to be, incapacitated for weeks at a time, and you're going to have incredible muscle loss, or you're elderly and you might have like a number of other ailments, nutrition can certainly support you along that journey along with all the other therapies that we have. And then there, minority of cases, there are interventions where nutrition is the sort of medicine without any other sort of additions to that. And there are some very impressive results with ketogenic diets in treatment refractory epilepsy. There are some very impressive results with IBS and low FODMAP diets as well. So, the way in which nutrition is being presented today, I think, is very different to how it was before. And I think there's a greater acceptance of it as well, particularly as more and more doctors and clinicians in general are getting sick, and they know what the trajectory is. Once you're sick and you're starting on a medication for, let's say, type 2 diabetes, then it's just a matter of time until you're on 2 meds and 3 meds. And then all of a sudden you have blood pressure issues. And then all of a sudden you're having amputation. No one wants that. Mm-hmm. And now, a lot more people are exploring other avenues, and nutrition really does come up top when it comes to the things you can do every single day, along with all the other lifestyle factors to optimize and to prevent those issues.
I wish I listened to people that knew more about this stuff. Like my mum was always more interested in the healthy food eating and taking care of oneself. And I didn't really listen to her advice. I thought that I knew best, and I took it a little bit too far, Rupy. I ended up in hospital with a severe bowel blockage, which came from the result of lack of proper nutrients and foods, which then led to me 9 days in hospital, getting that bowel unblocked, which then led to IBS, which then led to SIBO. And then I finally woke up in hospital and was like, hey, I've got to start changing things. And lo and behold, I learned how to cook from good old Gordon Ramsay. And I started doing a lot of research into, okay, what diets, what kind of food groups here work well with people with IBS, with SIBO, for example, not eating a ton of sugar, eating clean, all these aspects of it. I started to do a lot of personal research because I was just interested in it. But for someone that, like yourself, someone that, does all the research, I'm curious, like, what got you interested in the first place? Like, was there anything that you did or you brought up in a different way, like your parents were mindful of it? What was the catalyst for you in studying more about nutrition and proper diet?
Yeah, the catalyst for me was getting ill myself when I was a junior doctor. So I grew up in an Indian household. So, the typical Ayurvedic influences of Indian parents were present throughout my childhood. Turmeric milk, garam masala, all that kind of stuff. And when I went to med school, I was taught how to cook by my mum. So she taught me some basic recipes. And then basically when I was at uni, everyone knew me as like the cook. And so I really got into cooking there to sort of keep up this image of me being able to, being the chef at university sort of thing. And, I'd be cooking loads of different cuisines, Italian, American barbecue, all that kind of stuff. And then when I went to start work as a junior doctor 3 months in, and you can imagine like late nights, long shifts, night shifts, eating hospital food, eating on the go, high amounts of stress, poor sleep. I got ill, and my condition called atrial fibrillation was something that kind of came out of nowhere. There weren't any clear triggers. I would flip into this irregular heart rhythm. coupled with a fast beat as well. So it'd be like 200 beats per minute for 12 to 24 hours at a time, a couple of times a week. I remember the first time it happened, I was actually on shift. I'd been working like a long set of late shifts for that week. And I was admitted to the hospital. Super scary and vulnerable time when I was there. And I was discharged, luckily, that day. But what I thought was going to be like a one-off, it actually, would continue for at least a year and a half later. And that was sort of my start of a journey as a patient. And that sort of experience, whilst at the time I was super frustrated by, because you can imagine 24-year-old, no pre-existing conditions, no weight problems, no triggers found on my bloods, or, I wasn't like taking drugs or alcohol, or there were no reasons as to why I should be having this, at least according to conventional medicine. But I was still having these episodes. And so I saw a whole bunch of different cardiologists. I was offered something called an ablation, which is a cardiac procedure where you put a guide wire into the heart and you burn an area around the pulmonary vein. But my mum, again, with her Ayurvedic influence, even though she's not a doctor, said, you should really be optimizing your diet and your lifestyle before you entertain a more aggressive procedure. And that was the start for me, man. And I didn't know, as you know, from the lack of education at med school, I didn't know the first thing about nutrition. So I just started super basic, started chucking out my cereals in the morning. And then I would just start with like oats and then like add nuts and seeds because I heard those are fairly healthy. And then that gradually went to, okay, well, I'm going to bring in my lunch because I don't want to eat that mac and cheese that is always sold at the hospital canteen. And then I started like mixing up my workouts. So I wasn't doing intense workouts, but I would be doing like a mixture of like yoga and all that kind of stuff. Again, influence from my parents who also taught me how to meditate. And, over that period of time, whilst I thought I was going to be preparing myself for an ablation, because that's how I convinced myself to like eat healthy. I was like, well, it can't harm me and it will make mum feel a bit better. And I'm definitely going to have this ablation in the next like 3 to 6 months anyway, because like, there's no reason why this is going to stop. And they went away. I remember I fastidiously like tracked when I was having episodes, 2-3 times a week. And then all of a sudden it went like, okay, once a week. Okay. That's a bit odd. And then like, I remember looking at my diary where I was tracking, I was like, it's been 2 months. And then it was 3 and then 4. And then, I saw my cardiologist and I said, look, I haven't had an episode now for a couple of months. Do you want to let's just like park the ablation for now. And then I'll come back in 6 months. And they were like, very happy to do that. And I still see my cardiologist now, but yeah, I haven't had an episode since. And that was my introduction, into how effective lifestyle can be, even if there isn't a clear reason as to why this is working. And that kind of, piqued my interest and led me to do a deep dive into nutrition, learn a lot more about this, and also have more honest conversations with patients and see how diet and lifestyle can improve what they were suffering with, whether it be arthritis or type 2 diabetes or weight or, the things that everyone is suffering with right now. And the research is there. We just haven't really been using it.
We've got another similar thing about ourselves, man. Like my heart is abnormally large and it skips a beat every now and then. Or it skips every second beat, I think it is. And then it sort of like catches itself up a little bit. So you kind of like, sometimes you get a little bit out of breath. Like my breaths are shorter sometimes, or they can be really, really long. And then I'm like, whoops. And then also I've had pericarditis twice.
Oh, wow.
With the heart. So I'm not here to give you all my illnesses. This is well before I changed my diet, which funny enough, I haven't had any issues or any problems since regarding my heart. Even though there's like a lot of stress and anxiety and things like that, I do practices now and I eat certain foods now that help alleviate that stress and keep me in that calm state, because I know it's going to affect my heart even more and affect other areas of my body. So it's very interesting how food plays an important role. And I'm curious, like, why chuck out all the cereals, man? Like, that's all the good stuff, right? What's wrong with them?
Yeah. The cereals I was eating. I mean, like, you just look at like the packet. It's a good exercise, I think, for anyone when they're in the supermarkets. Just look at the packet and look at the amount of sugar that is contained in your typical cereal. Even like the ones that are marketed as healthy, the Kellogg's of the world, the Special K's and all that kind of stuff. You know, it's pretty horrific when you have this realization that this is the kind of stuff that I grew up on. You know, this is the kind of stuff that I would be eating pretty happily as a kid and into adulthood. And most people exceed even the WHO guidelines for added sugar consumption by breakfast. And that's pretty much what I was doing. You know, glass of orange juice, bit of cereal, maybe a bit of toast, bit of jam on the toast. You know, that was sort of like a typical, and it's a very typical breakfast now for a lot of people. And that was a bit of a realization. I remember like, I don't know whether I was Googling something or maybe I was speaking to someone, but they were like, yeah, maybe you should like, you know, cut out the sugar a bit. And so I was looking at sources of sugar, and that's kind of what led me to the cereal box. And I took that out pretty much straight away. And then I added, you know, nuts and seeds. They're satiating, they're healthy, got fiber, all those different elements that I talk about so often now, because it's very much lacking in people's diets, fiber in general. So yeah, that was like an easy starting point. I think it's a good easy starting point for a lot of people as well. I know it's kind of fashionable to skip breakfast these days, and every now and then I do as well. But you know, sometimes my experience of dealing with patients, it's probably the easiest starting point is to set your day up right. And eating something nutritious.
You mentioned to me originally, I think it's a good basis and a good understanding for people to sort of cut out the sugar, because I think we know these days that sugar is highly toxic to our bodies, or too much of it, right? And it can do a lot of damage to our mental health as well as our physical health, making us feel and our internal organs, that sort of thing. But I wanted to ask you about your passion project that turned into this incredible business that is now taking over everything. You got an app launching. The inception of that, did that come off the back of you getting sick and then finding out, okay, I've got all these recipes, these food ideas that I can share with the world? Was that the inception of it?
Well, the honest answer is I never intended it to be a business at all. It was purely a passion project. You know, I was working in Australia at the time. I had this idea of the Doctor's Kitchen like back in 2012, I think it was. I was training as a general practitioner. And I just kind of kept that to myself. And then when I went to Australia, I remember telling a few people, including some senior colleagues, I said, look, I keep on running late in clinic. I'm constantly talking to patients about like how they can cook. No one seems to know how to make the basic of meals, and no one knows anything about nutrition. And so, you know, I got this idea of creating like this YouTube channel where I create meals. I talk about the health benefits. I talk about the evidence base, the papers and the academic literature. And, you know, people can sort of like teach a man to fish sort of thing. And I remember telling that to a bunch of people, and they really convinced me to start. And so when I started, the honest answer is it was just, you know, start on Instagram. Instead of running late in clinic, I can just say, look, watch this video. It's of me. It's basically what I'm going to tell you right now. Here's a few ideas for recipe inspo. And when I started, you know, it just, you know, is that the right time for social media, I guess, in 2015. Instagram was still growing. And within 6 months, I got approached by a publisher to do a book. And that was never the intention. I never I never had like on my vision board a book. I want to be like, the next Rick Stein or the next Jamie Oliver. That was never the intention. It just sort of happened that way. And then the book led to the podcast. I never wanted to do a podcast. The publishers actually convinced me to do a podcast. And the podcast led to me percolating the idea around the app and the tech and all that kind of stuff, because I was having these amazing conversations with researchers and clinicians from around the world about how they're helping people and how they're using lifestyle medicine. And the bugbear for me was like, look, this is great, but we're having like hour-long conversations that a lot of people aren't going to be able to put in practice unless they're really, really motivated. And so tech can really liberate sort of the actions. It can really sort of get people on that. I mean, the success of things like Headspace and Calm and Fabulous as great, tech products. We can really utilize the same learnings and the same examples from those products and apply that to nutritional medicine. So we can help people leverage the power of food. And that's sort of where I'm at now. So now I regard it as a business. I would say if you asked me 3-4 years ago, it was definitely not something that I would consider changing my career for. And I guess I'm in that transition point where, I've been a doctor for over a decade, coming up to 15 years now. And I would never have thought that I would consider leaving my clinical career to do something in this space, but it seems that I'm on that journey and I'm really excited about it.
Do you ever see yourself sort of being still a practicing doctor while running the business one day, or just more focusing on the business?
I've been a practicing doctor whilst running everything, and leading that double life is hard. Like up to this point, I've written 3 books, run a nonprofit, done a whole bunch of like corporate speaking events, recorded over 200 podcasts, done YouTube, continued on social media, had endless sort of articles and all that kind of stuff whilst being a doctor on the side. And I think something's got to give, and you can only do a few things very well. And I think if you spread yourself too thin, you lose sort of the edge. And whilst I'd love to be a practicing doctor and be able and convince myself that I can do all those things, it's tough. It's really tough. And I've got to lean into what actually truly makes me happy, which is a good sort of circle back to what we're talking about. And what really makes me happy is actually the stuff that I do within the doctor's kitchen. And in terms of like really trying to have, if I would look back in my life in the next few decades, what I want to tell myself is I taught thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people how they can better their own health, rather than, I treated a couple of thousand people a year. And that sort of authoritarian sort of didactic relationship that you have with the doctor patient is not scalable. Yeah. And, once you've sort of opened Pandora's box, it's very hard to go back, man. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
3 quick final questions for you. This whole idea of diets, I think there's a lot of information out there of which one people should go to and so forth. Are you a fan of one diet per se, or is just a combination of all? I have what I call the freedom diet.
Yeah.
Combination of everything intertwined, but I'm curious, what's your thoughts on it?
No, I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to diets. People want to go low carb or paleo or vegan, Mediterranean, vegetarian. Like for me, it doesn't really matter. I think you can grade a diet based on something called the Healthy Eating Index, which essentially is, mostly plants, lots of fiber, lots of variety. The crux of everything is your ability to consistently eat well.
Yeah.
And if that means that, you're more likely to stick to a diet that has some meat in it, great. As long as you're having all the other vegetables and you've got enough fiber and all the rest of it, that's great, because consistency is king. I always come back to this A to Z study that was done at Stanford with Professor Gardner, and they were looking at weight as an endpoint, which is a pretty blunt tool, but a good measure when it comes to academic studies. And they found that people who enjoyed the diet that they were on the most were able to achieve the positive outcomes associated with weight loss and consistently keeping that weight off. So the enjoyment of your diet is key. And no one really talks about that. People talk about the best diet. People don't talk about the most enjoyable diet that you can consistently eat well on. And that's where we need to focus on. It's about consistency rather than the type of diet per se.
Yeah. Everyone's like, eat your veggies, but I don't maybe not like vegetables. I personally do, but some of my family members don't. So there's that side of things. I'd much rather eat a steak than have the broccoli or whatever it is. So anyway, I digress. I wanted to ask you this one. What do you love the most about yourself and your story?
Oh, well, what do I love about myself? It's interesting you say that, because in my third book, in the acknowledgements, I thank myself, because this is not something I tend to do. I'm not very sort of, I don't tend to give myself that much credit. And I think that what I love about myself is the fact that I can practice gratitude, and I sort of always look at things through the lens of gratitude, which I think is an important skill to hone for anyone, because it just makes everything so much happier. This water that I'm drinking, the fact that I've got a coffee this morning that's been, flown in big sacks from Rwanda or Ethiopia, and, I get to brew it. I mean, like, how amazing is that, man? It's incredible. It's like these little graces that we don't take notice of, because it's, we've adapted to it hedonically. Once you lean into that, once you really sort of like grasp just the magnitude of how incredible that is, life is amazing. And so that's definitely something that I'm glad I'm good at. And the other thing that I think, and this is probably something I've learned as well, is my ability to do things and motivate myself to do things consistently. So I'm pretty good at starting habits, because I start very, very small, and I get up in the morning, I meditate, I exercise every single day, I eat well every day. People will probably listen to this and like cringe, but that is that's something I'm really glad I'm able to do, but it's achievable for everyone. And that's what I'm trying to teach people. It's like, you can achieve this. I wasn't like this before, particularly when I was like, ill. And my threshold for getting ill is a lot lower than my peers. And that's why I was ill at age 24 when they were doing all the same things. And now they continue to do the same things into their, late 30s and 40s. And I've got a head start on them because I got ill at an early age. So I'm sort of, again, grateful for that. So yeah, my ability to do things consistently and motivate myself, and gratitude, man.
Yeah, I can understand, and I can relate to quite a few things you said there, especially the waking up and exercising, the meditation, eating relatively healthy. I mean, I do have a weakness with donuts, but I gotta have a little bit of sweetness every now and then. You got to live a little bit, but
definitely,
for the most part,
doesn't, man?
Healthy. But when you said the acknowledgements, I was like, I want to thank me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
You don't know how hard it is to write a book, but anyway, this is my final question for you, man. This is my all-time favorite question. I love asking all my guests at the very end. It is a hypothetical one, but I want you to imagine with me for a moment that you've been able to reach the age of 100. All your friends and your family have decided to put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how in the world they got it all. We'll call it magic for the sake of argument. But being able to get it and show it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want that film to say and to show about your life?
So I think what I'd want it to show is this long table with multi-generations around it. with, family and friends, and like kids running around and like everyone smiling and eating well and conversing, and there to be just like an incredible energy and vibe around that. I was lucky enough to experience this very recently, actually. I went to a wedding and they had one long table. I remember just sat there. I was sat next to the grandma who had her great grandchildren running around, and that sort of intergenerational, the connection I thought was just amazing. It's a sort of very Mediterranean, I guess, to have those Sunday sessions. And I think if I could be shown that we have Sunday sessions like that every week where everything's chill, everyone spends a good quality couple of hours with each other, learning from each other, conversing with each other, smiling and laughing with each other, man, that's a kick-ass life right there. So yeah, hopefully they'll be showing me that, a collection of all those different Sunday sessions over 100-year span. That'd be awesome.
Dr. Rupy, man, I've loved this conversation, but thank you so much for joining me and sharing your stories, your wisdom and your advice, and for basically being here on the Storybox podcast with me. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jay. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is lovely.